Hello there and welcome back to Spar&Brawl. Probably one of the funniest stories from this week was the allegation by the US Director of National Intelligence that both Iran and Russia have obtained US voter registration information and that Iran is sending threatening emails. So there was, on top of the fact that they've obtained voter registration email, the director of the national intelligence provided one example of what is being done by that, which is apparently a spoof email that was sent by Iranians to US voters. So, according to the head of the national intelligence, Iran has been sending spoof emails to scare voters, and an example of such an email was shared. The email was apparently made to look like it was sent by the Proud Boys and had "Vote for Trump or else" as its subject line. And apparently, that was meant to scare voters from voting for Trump, which has also left the mainstream media baffled. I was watching the CNN's coverage of this, and they're like, "Yeah, so this email that threatens people to vote for Trump apparently is an anti-Trump email." So I guess you have to do like a few levels of mental gymnastic, which I guess would be it would put people off Trump so much, and they would be so disgusted because this email is associated with the Proud Boys that they're gonna flip to Biden. So I guess that is kind of and the logic there. But really, two hilarious aspects I found about this story. The first one is just how much it's been blown out of proportion. So let's say if they've got some voter registration information and they tried to tamper a bit with the US election, does this mean that that's it? Everything is going to be illegitimate? That's what they make it seem like. But the funniest part is that, so at least in the media reports, they've grouped Russia and China and Russia and Iran together, right? They're saying that both these countries have obtained voter registration information. However, according to them, the Russians are using this information in order to get Trump reelected, whereas the Iranians want to get Biden reelected. So, best case scenario, these two countries are colluding together in order to cancel each other out. So I guess it's not even a bad thing if that's how it goes. Sam, do you have anything to add to this story?
Sure. To be honest, I love the vagueness of the language, just like the
Yeah.
Russiagate thing. That Iran and Russia. What does that mean? Individuals? Does that mean a certain organization? Because there are certain Iranian organizations and Russian organizations that are backed by the U.S. So you could maybe CIA gave it to them.
Yeah.
But anyways, uh, it's to be honest, when I read first, I was because we just talked about this story before the recording in our meeting before just before the recording, and I was quite interested the way you found it to be an obvious falsehood, right? I mean, the way we talked about it.
Always
I
falsehood,
mean,
or like maybe
typical
something small.
unforced.
Maybe they sure. I mean, I'm sure
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
some attempts here and there, but it's not something serious that the public should be
Yeah, yeah.
worried
No, no.
about.
I took it basically, yeah, exactly in the same vein as the Russia Gate. Maybe there is a grain of truth to it, but
Yeah.
it's basically overblown. There are no sources, blah blah blah. Anyway, but the channel that you've mentioned quite a few times with Sagar, Enjeti, and Crystal Ball, in their coverage, they basically were laughing at the people who they took it. They said this shows that in a way, I think in their coverage, basically they were accepting the premise that Iran was trying to interfere using Proud Boys as a cover within the election, but they said it's so idiotic and it's just it will be this the significance would be it would be insignificant basically. It wouldn't have any effect. So not all the coverage is necessary taking it in that light, even the
Yeah.
coverage that is critical of it. So, that was quite interesting because basically they seem to think it was real. Iran was trying to. I think, to be honest, I don't know, but I would assume Iranian government has much more interesting and better things to do than,
Yeah.
you know, and I mean, yeah, the whole thing was. There may be
Exactly.
some
Especially
pranksters
because
from Iran.
yeah, exactly. Especially, if you think about how far your influence could go. I mean, is it worth taking part in such activities if you're gonna, change a few votes here and there?
Yeah, exactly. And
And on
yeah,
top of that,
it's
all the crap that they'd have to say, everything's already being said. So other people from the US are already doing that job anyway. So it's not like you're infiltrating
no,
new
but
information.
this was I mean, did you read the actual email?
And no, I didn't. I just know that the subject line said that, vote for Trump or else. And
Oh no, man! You should have read the actual email. It was quite interesting. They said that uh, we are emailing you this, and we have access to your information because we have hacked the voting infrastructure, the whole infrastructure of U.S. Voting system. Now we have access to all your information. You have to change your party affiliation so we know that you're aware of this. Uh, we highly suggest you comply. It was a cartoonishly
yeah,
like it was kind of like Nigerian princess style. Like, if you don't do this, we'll fuck you up, man.
it
We'll
sounds.
come after you and your family. Like, it was cartoon, and the argument was that they were doing this from the as Proud Boys because they wanted to make Trump look bad as a sort of a fascist type figure. So
I'm
it
sure
it was
there's a
a
better example they
so
could have
many
found.
layers, huh?
I'm sure there's a better example the director of the national intelligence could have found, and blame Iran, than this email.
I think the email itself didn't really help the case. They could have just
No, of
said
course not.
there.
I
They,
mean,
they could
even
have just gone with the vague, usual,
100%, 100%. Because, like I said, even CNN they had problem twisting that. They're
yeah.
like, what do
That's
you
the
want me
thing.
to? What do you want
They
us to do with this?
yeah, on the Hill they were laughing at Rachel Maddow because
Oh,
they said because Rachel Maddow was dumbfounded. How could this help uh, Trump or whatever? But yeah, it was quite interesting. The whole
man.
another case of I think to be honest, the real story because if you listen to the whole press conference by the CIA director, it was CIA director, right?
Yeah, no, National Intelligence Director.
Oh,
And then the
national.
FBI was, and then the FBI added something, if I'm not mistaken.
All right. I think the main story was they are trying to reassure people about election security. They are trying to say everything is under control because I think they are somewhat worried about either side. If either side wins, there is going to be, I think, allegations of, interference one way or another. So I think they are trying to basically reduce tensions. That was the real thing. So they come up with some bullshit, or maybe there is a grain of truth
Yeah,
to the
no, you're
story,
right
and
because I mean that
and
makes no
then how
sense.
they everything is under control, blah blah blah.
But that was a bad way to to convey that point because
Yeah,
it got
I think
lost into the.
it could work with the target audience because
I
I think
see.
significant American population believes there is a foreign interference, and they like to hear things. I don't think it's really significant in any major way, but it may hit its target audience in a correct way.
You know,
It may.
I feel like if there were any like mass like voter hacking or like issues in the election in the U.S., it's a country where it'd be very obvious, just because we already know which percentage of the population will for sure vote red and will for sure vote blue. So as long as those look kinda normal, anything that happened, if anything happens, it's very minor. Whereas in other countries where there are maybe more parties, maybe things change drastically from one election to another, it will be harder to spot it. But in the case of the U.S., you can always count on this many people voting Republican, this many people voting Democrat, and pretty much a third not voting at all. So when it's between those fine margins, then it kind of shows that there wasn't anything bad that happened, at least at a large scale.
The,
That's
the,
kind of just like,
the thing is,
theorizing.
no, you're right in a way, but to be honest, the thing in the US and in a way UK is that because of the first past the post
Mm-hmm.
election system, electoral system, very small interferences could have significant effects. For example, like 100,000 votes could win you a state with a large, with large points. And, so there are, the reality is US elections have always been, you know, corruption has always been there. Election interference has always been there. There's nothing special or unique about it in this time around. But the idea that foreign powers interfere in US elections, I think that's just childish in many ways at the moment. It's, yeah, I don't think, and especially the way they don't even argue that, for example, they hacked into the online electoral results and they changed it because most elections through they say it's through, for example, advertisement and brainwashing through social media, which is just unproven. But on it's the influence of social media, blah blah blah, all of that. So just the argument and the rationale, all of it is all, I think, bullshit. Far, but obviously there has always been corruption and
Hmm.
interference and rigging and famous gerrymandering. The way they draw up states in a first past the post system to favor certain political parties. So that's always been happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, and let's, yeah, reduce that as much as we can. But Iranians and Russian hackers, doing trying to brainwash Americans through emails, threatening emails that will reverse psychology to so people will vote for Biden. Anyway,
Yeah.
it's so
But
idiotic.
just like you're saying, not only is there like all these layers of corruption, but there's also like a whole bigger fundamental issue is that it's so limited within these two parties. So the whole game pretty much starts at like the very end, where every year, all the ideas, all the parties, everyone is already canceled out, and you just get at this very end of it, pretty much, which is between like this Democrat and Republican, which who knows the differences,
Yeah,
nothing, just play on
the
the
collab.
same games, and then there's the
I mean,
corruption within that.
I'm not saying if tomorrow they allow a third party
Yeah,
candidate on debates, they're gonna immediately get 25% of the vote share. But the last time they allowed a third party candidate in 1990s, Ross Perot, he got 10% of the vote. So there is a reason they exclude third party candidates. And yeah, it could, like, that's the biggest probably case of use of power to marginalize unwanted groups, basically. So
yeah,
yeah, there are far more bigger issues at play when it comes to fairness within American elections
exactly.
than Iranian and Russian influence.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in the U.S., exactly, the president can only come from two ideologies that are just slightly different from each other. So everything else from the get go is put aside.
As I think, like as Gore Vidal famously put it, America has one political party with two wings.
Yeah.
So, basically, and they're both for war. I think I'm paraphrasing the last part.
No, 100%. So anything else on the US election? They were pretty much the last debate happened 2 days ago. I watched parts of it. So there were a couple of new rules in the beginning. The microphone, I believe only for the opening speech, they muted the other person's microphone. I watched about 30 minutes of the election, of the debate, and they barely talk, they didn't really talk over each other this time. I think Trump had realized that that wasn't a,
I
that
I
strategy
heard,
wasn't.
to be honest, interestingly, I didn't hear about this debate until maybe an hour before it or something. I felt there was very little to no publicity surrounding it, which was odd to me.
Same. I
But
thought it
then,
wasn't even happening anymore.
yeah, yeah. And then today I heard on TV. I'm not sure. I just heard this on TV. I didn't read it or I didn't, check it. Uh, that over 100 million people have watched it, which was sounded like a very large
Yeah,
audience to me.
because I think I heard the
But
previous
I'll
one
check.
was somewhere in the 70 million people who watched it.
Yeah, I'll check.
So this one
But
more, I would doubt it. And the coverage I saw was, I mean, some of it was from CNN and all this, and it was again who won, and they're like, oh,
Biden.
Biden won. But man, one thing with Biden though, I don't know what the hell happened, but he, he doesn't seem to have like, if you had just watched this debate And him recently, all these things about him losing his mind and everything. I mean, he was as normal as Joe Biden as you. I mean, I don't know what happened during that period around like from let's say January, February until June, where he had all these
I
crazy gaffes on on they weren't like he wasn't having an interview with a journalist was really pushing him. I mean, he was going on his usual channels, on the usual mainstream Democrat channels, MSNBC and everything, and he was having a bunch of issues answering questions, which he didn't really have when he was against in the final debate
debate.
against Bernie Sanders, and now again versus Trump. So I don't know what happened during that period. I mean, maybe he got better, or I don't. I'm
I
not too
think, to be
sure.
honest, after coronavirus, he didn't have to travel as much, so he can rest more at home. And I think before debates, they basically fill him with drugs that, bring him a
Keep him.
bit up. So I think
Yeah,
that's the main reason. But yeah, I do think he does probably is going through, uh, uh, deterioration in his cognitive
yeah,
uh, abilities. But yeah, he was, I mean, so is Trump, clearly. I mean, Trump was born with
yeah.
a significant deterioration. He already started at a very bad place. And I think over the last 50 years, he's been deteriorating every day. But yeah, so yeah, uh, I agree that he's been okay in these debates. But when you compare him, for example, to his debate with Paul Ryan, or when he was interviews he gave during his vice presidency, especially early years, he was a much more vibrant and lively individual. Like, you can clearly tell he's changed.
Yeah, I mean, it was also
Maybe
12 years ago and stuff. So I mean, it makes sense. He's
eight,
becoming an
8.
older man. Yeah, yeah. If it
Yeah,
was
but
during his meal.
there is a different, like, when you between 15 to 25, you age, in my view, a lot more significantly than you age between 25 to 35. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? Like, some there are, like, so, I found this, that with a lot of elder people, after a certain point, they suddenly, you see a clear deterioration. So I think, to be honest, that largely means Kamala Harris and or other members of the cabinet are going to play a huge role
Yeah.
in the future of the party.
Okay, all right. So I don't think we have anything else on U.S. elections. However, last week we did a super interesting video on a Senate race going on in South Carolina. That's where Lindsey Graham has been the senator for, I don't know, for 15 years or longer, and he's actually in a tight race versus a centrist Democrat by the name of Jamie Harrison, who has shattered all previous fundraising records. Right now, he has more money until the end of. Right now, he has more money than Trump has. I saw a
Mhm.
comparison. And the race is tight, and it's something we're going to keep an eye on. But if you're interested, go check out a video on our channel from last week.